All right, hang on tight because we are going to go through 5 important concepts for the bishop that are pretty much unrelated. We're going to talk about the Greek gift sacrifice, the double bishop sacrifice, opposite colored bishops, the 2 bishop checkmate, and the Centurini position. So let's get going. First of all, the Greek gift sacrifice. The Greek gift is when you give up your bishop for that H pawn, and it only works if all these components are in place. You have to make sure that your knight can move up to the G file, protected safely for a check, and sometimes you are working with a rook instead of a knight. But in the main line with a knight, that your queen can get out to the H file to threaten checkmate, and that your opponent can't guard checkmate on that square where your sacrifice was made, on either H7 or if it's black doing it, H2. And so this one, the rook would probably run away, check, and then checkmate. Our next pattern is also called the Lasker Sacrifice because Emanuel Lasker did it in this famous game that we're looking at here against Bauer. And this was a long time ago, back in the 1800s. And in this position, after Bauer played knight takes h5, Lasker's going to sacrifice both of his bishops to rip open that king side. Check. Check. And then crunch. The bishop takes g7, threatening the queen checkmate at h8. Once the king takes here, now he's just wide open on the G and H files. Check. And a rook lift. Check. And black had to give away the queen. And of course, lost the game. All right, so now let's take it to something totally different and talk about opposite colored bishops. Opposite colored bishops are when you have one bishop on the light squares and one on the dark squares. And as you can see from this position, white cannot win. White can't force a win, even though white has 2 extra pawns. This is actually a pretty easy, very easy draw. I think you could draw it against Magnus Carlsen in this position because the black bishop is simply just going to go back and forth to these squares, something like that. And white can never make any progress because the white bishop is on the light squares. He can't check the king. He just stays right where he is, and there's nothing that's going to push that king and bishop out of the way. But let's start to separate the pawns a little bit. Let's have a look in this position. Now, those 2 pawns are a little further apart, and the white king comes in. He's trying to cause some trouble. Now he's going to try to sneak around to the outside, but the black king gets over there in plenty of time to stop him, and there's no progress to be made. Okay, let's push the pawns a little further, and now things are going to be a lot tougher for black. And the white king once again is trying to run over to the G file, so it might look something like this, where the king's going to sneak around, or maybe the bishop goes back to d8 and the king goes sneaking around this way. And now black is in a bit of zugzwang because this pawn wants to push, and if the bishop moves and stays on that diagonal to stop that pawn from pushing, then the other pawn can push up. The f pawn can push. So it gets a little bit tricky. And in this case, white actually has worked it to have a win in this position. All right, our next one is the 2 bishop checkmate. Now this 2 bishop checkmate, this was taught to me by my friends National Master Brian Tillis and USCF expert Steve Abrams. And the idea here is pretty cool. You're going to create this pattern where your king is lined up with your 2 bishops on that same rank, and it makes this little box. And then you just keep repeating this pattern. And you have the same pattern again, pushing that king back. And then once we have him pushed back this far, then Brian and Steve say, push this king over into this corner. So you need to guard this square, then make sure he can't come back to here, guard that square, and just push him 1 square at a time over to that corner. So now we don't want him to come back to e7. The king comes in, and now he can't go to e8. And at this point, you make sure the king can't turn the corner, king to g6. And now it's just like a bishop roller, like a rook roller, but with the bishops. Check and checkmate. All right, finally, the Centurini position, which is way back from the 1800s, 1856. And this is a composition in which white is trying to promote this pawn, but the black bishop is here to stop it. And so the white bishop has a goal to get over here to a7, up to b8, to push that bishop off, and then come out of the way and then deflect the bishop again. But black is fighting it. And so now the black king has stopped that from happening. But white wastes a move here. And so black has to move the bishop out from its hiding spot. Let's see why that's important. Now check, and we're back to this starting position with one important difference. The bishop's not on h2, instead it's on g3, and white takes advantage of that, picks up a tempo with bishop to h4. The bishop moves back, and now the bishop does have time to make it to a7, b8, scoot out of the way, and then deflect black's bishop for the win. Wow, that was a lot of stuff. You might want to watch this video again. Enjoy Chess Hoots, and make sure to check out chesshoots.com, and I'll check you later.